quick demo of this video tutorial. In this video, we are going to implement user registration in ASP.NET Core Web API and Angular 7 using Identity Core. So here we have the final output of this video tutorial. Now let's try to sign up an user. So here we have populated this form with details of user Olivia Kathleen. Now let's sign up this form. So here we have created the new user. Inside this form, we have implemented few form validations. We have default validations such as required validation, email validation, meal length validation. Along with this default validation, we have a custom validation in order to compare password entered into these two text boxes here. If there is a mismatch, it will be shown under this confirm password text box here. In next video, we will update both .NET Core Web API and Angular 7 project in order to implement user authentication using JSON Web Token. So I'm sure in this series of video tutorials, we have to learn a lot of things. So please watch till the end of this video series. Before starting this video, I would like to ask you a favor. If you found this video helpful, please thumbs up this video. If you are new here, please be subscribed to this channel and click on the bell icon to get notification about my new videos. Most of the video lesson here also has a written blog post. You can find the link in video description. You can grab code from there as well. What's up YouTube? Welcome to CodAffection. In this video, I will show you how to implement user registration in ASP.NET Core Web API project using Angular 7 and Identity Core. In the next video, we will update these projects for JSON Web Token or JWT authentication with login and logout feature. In previous video, we have discussed how to implement CRUD operations in ASP.NET Core Web API with Angular 7. I have given the link in video description. Before starting this tutorial, I would like to thank for your PayPal donations for my previous works. In order to make more helpful and quality tutorials like this, you can support me through PayPal donations. I have given the PayPal donation link in first comment and video description. Without further ado, let's get started. Here is my Visual Studio 2017. First of all, we have to build a web API using ASP.NET Core. So go to File, then New, then Project. From the left panel, select .NET Core under Visual C#, then select ASP.NET Core Web Application. Then name your application here. I will name it as Web API. Then select the location where you want to save this application. Finally, click on OK. At the top, make sure that we have selected .NET Core and latest version of ASP.NET Core. Then you can select this API template here. Then I will uncheck this configuration option for HTTPS. Then make sure that here we have selected no authentication. Finally, click on OK. So here we have a brand new ASP.NET Core Web API project. Now inside this API project, we have to discuss how to insert or create user using ASP.NET Identity Core. Actually, ASP.NET Identity Core is a membership system which provides features like user management, role management, user authentication, authorization, social logins, etc, etc, etc. So in this video, we will discuss how we can use this Identity Core for user registration. In the next video, we will use the same for user authentication using JWT or JSON Web Token. So first of all, we have to create a DB context which inherits from Identity Core context. First of all, we have to create a models folder here. So right click on this project, then add new folder. I will name this folder as models. Inside that, let's create a class file, add class. Name of the class will be authentication context. Normally, when we create context class, we will inherit the class from DB context. But in this case, we have to use Identity Core. So there is a specific DB context class, which is Identity DB context. Now let's add the corresponding using statement. For that, you can use the shortcut, hold Control, then press period, and I will select this using statement here. Inside that, we have to add the constructor, so you can use this snippet CTOR. For this constructor, we have a parameter db context options. For that, we have to use this namespace, and I will name this parameter as options. And finally, we have to pass the same parameter value into the parent class. So we can call this base function here. It will call the parent constructor. Into that, we have to pass the same parameter options. Now into this db context options parameter, we have to pass values like provider. It might be SQL Server, MySQL, PostgreSQL, etc. Then we have to pass the corresponding db connection string also. Now, what do we pass the value of these constructor parameters? For that, we can use dependency injection in ASP.NET Core. Now let's look how we can inject this class authentication context and how it works. Open this startup class here. Inside that, we have this function configuration services, where we have this parameter services of the type iService collection. Into the collection, we have added this MVC as a service. Like that, we can add the context class services dot add db context, which is of the type authentication context. For that, we have to add the using statement. Inside this function call, we have to provide the db provider and db connection string. For that, I will add this lambda expression with options dot, we can call this use SQL Server function. So using this function, we have specified SQL Server as a db provider. Now we have to add the corresponding using statement. Now inside this function, we have to provide the db connection string. So first of all, we have to save that inside this JSON file here, app-settings.json. Along with these key values here, I'm going to add a new one, connection strings. Inside this, we can add as much as db connections we want. For now, we need a connection for identity core. So I will name this connection as identity connection. And we can specify the connection like this. First of all, we have server key. So I will provide the SQL Server instance details here. For me, it is local /, we have to provide 2 / here. Then instance name will be SQL Express. After that, we have database. It will be user DB. We will access this DB using local authentication. So I will set this trusted_connection and I will set it as true. In order to execute multiple query batches with the same connection, we have to set one more property here, multiple active result sets, and I will set it as true. So here we have defined the DB connection string. Now let's access that inside this startup class function here. For that, we can use this variable configuration of the type iConfiguration. So we just need to do this configuration dot get connection string function can be called. Inside that, we have to provide the connection string name. So I will copy this and pasting here. So with this function called add DB context from services variable, we have injected this authentication context class into this application. So from now onwards, in order to create an instance of this authentication context class, we don't have to create the instance using new keyword syntax like we used to do in previous traditional applications. ASP.NET Core will inject this authentication DB context automatically when we have a constructor parameter of this type. For example, inside this controllers folder, we have a default controller, values controller. In order to show you how it works, I will add a constructor here. Then I will add a constructor parameter of the type authentication context. We have to add this namespace. I will name this parameter as context. So from now onwards, when we make a request into this value controller, automatically an instance of this value controller will be created. And value of this context parameter will be passed from the dependency injection, since we have added that context class inside these services here. So this is how dependency injection works. So here we have done with initial configuration of identity context. As you know, identity core works based on entity framework core code first approach. So inside this assembly, there is an entity type for user, which is called identity user. Inside that, we have column properties for saving details like username, email address, encrypted password, etc. If you want to add a new property or column, or if you want to customize any of the existing columns, you have to inherit that class identity user into this project. So let's look how we can customize the identity user entity type. For that, we are going to add a new class inside this models folder. I will name this class as application user. And we want to inherit this class from identity user. Let's add the corresponding using statement. Now I want to customize this identity user by just adding a column for full name. So I will add a new property here. It will be of the type string, and I will name this as full name. So here we have defined the column for full name. Corresponding column will have the data type n-varchar max. N-varchar max is more than what we need, so I want to define the corresponding data type here using this attribute column. Let's add the corresponding import statement. Inside that, we just need to specify this type name, and I will set it as n-varchar 150. Now, in order to mention these customizations as part of this context here, we have to create a property outside this constructor property, which is of the type dbSet, and which is of this type application user. And I will name this property as application users. So far we have configured DB context for identity core, and then we have customized the entity type for user. Now let's configure the identity core itself. For that, back to this startup class here. Along with these services, we have to add the identity here. So services dot add default identity, and here we have to pass the corresponding entity class application user. So this function call will add common services from identity core into this application. Along with that, we have to chain one more function, add entity framework stores. So this function actually add the entity framework implementation of the identity core. Along with this function, we have to specify this context here, authentication context. Finally, inside this configuration function, we have to call the use authentication function from app variable here. Use authentication. So here we have done with initial configuration of this identity core. Now let's create the physical DB based on this entity framework model here. For that, open package manager console here. For me, I can see the package manager console here. If you can't see this here, you can go to tools, then NuGet package manager, then package manager console. First of all, we have to add a migration. So you can use this command add dash migration. Then we have to name this migration. I will set it as initial create. Hit enter. As a result of this command execution, here we have a new folder migrations. Inside that we have corresponding migration files. Now let's create the physical DB. For that you can use this command update dash database. Hit enter. Now let's look whether we have created a new DB or not. Here is my management studio. Let's expand this databases node here. So here is the new DB, user DB. Inside that we should have few tables from identity core. We have table for user and we have table for role, and we will map these two tables inside this table user roles in order to specify roles assigned to a particular user. And claims of user will be stored inside this table and role claims will be stored inside this table. And here we have the user logins table, which is used for the social logins purpose, and here we have the user tokens table. For this user registration part, we have to insert a new record into this table ASP.NET users. Inside that we will store the details of user. Now let's look the design of this table. Here we have the primary key for this table ID, which is automatically created by identity core. And here we have username. We have to insert value for this column. Then we have email and we have the encrypted password. And finally we have the custom column full name. And we have column for phone number. Along with these columns we have some automatically generated columns. Other than that, we have few columns for verifying phone number or email address, etc. Now let's look how we can insert an user into this user table using identity core, which is the meat of this tutorial. So back to the web API project here. Then first of all we have to create a new controller. So right click on this controllers folder here, then add controller. I will select this template API controller empty, click on add. I will name this controller as application user controller. Inside this controller we need a web API method for user registration. In order to work with user registration or authentication, we have to use two classes from identity core, which are user manager and sign-in manager. User authentication will be covered in next video. So first of all we have to inject these two classes inside this controller. For that I will create private properties for corresponding classes here. Private user manager. For that we have to import this class, and which is of the type application user. Now let's add the corresponding using statement, and I will name this property as underscore user manager. Like this we have to create one more private property for sign-in manager also. So let me copy this and pasting below that. Instead of this class we have sign-in manager, and I will name this property as sign-in manager underscore sign-in manager. Now we have to inject these two classes inside the controller constructor. So here we have the snippet CTOR, and for this constructor we have two parameters of this type user manager and sign-in manager, and I will name this as user manager, and we have one more parameter of the type sign-in manager. I will name the parameter as sign-in manager here. So as a result of dependency injection, both of these parameter will have corresponding instance. Now we have to assign that into these private properties here. So underscore user manager is equal to user manager. Like that we have to assign this sign-in manager property also underscore sign-in manager. So this is how we can access injected instances. This dependency injection will take place because of the function that we have called here. As a result of this function, it will automatically inject these two classes of the type user manager and sign-in manager. We don't have to add that separate like we have done for this DB context class here. By default, these two classes invocation will do the dependency injection for this constructor here. Now let's create the web API for user registration. It will be of the type HTTP GET, and we have to define the route for this web API method. As you can see here, for this controller we will have the route like this: API / then controller name will be replaced here. So API / application user. So for this new web API method, I will specify the route like this: register. So in order to access this web API method, we have to make a post request. Here we have to change this into HTTP post. Now in order to consume this web API method here, we have to make a post request into this URI API / application user / register. Now let's define the web API method: public async. This web API method will return a task of the type object. I will name this method as post application user. Inside this web API method, we have to create an user. So while making requests into this web API method, we have to pass corresponding user details like user name, then email, password, full name, etc. For that, I will create a separate model file here. Add class. I will name this as application user model. Now let's add corresponding properties. So here we have added required properties for user registration. Now let's create a parameter of this type here. So application user model, I will name this as model. Now inside this model parameter, we will have the details of new user which is to be created. Now in order to insert that into the identity model or user table, we have to create an instance of this identity type application user. So we can do this: application user is equal to new application user. Along with this constructor, we can pass the values from this method parameter. So first of all, we have username, and I will set it as model.username. Then we have email is equal to model.email. Then we have full name, model.fullname. Now let's insert this application user instance. So first of all, I will add this try catch here. Inside this catch block, I will throw the exception EX. Inside this try block, we can do this: var result is equal to underscore user manager dot create async function can be called. As a first parameter, we can pass this object application user. As a second parameter, we have to pass the password, which we have not mentioned as part of this user instance creation here because password should be encrypted. So we can pass that here, model.password. That's it. Finally, we can return this result from this web API method. For that, we just need to do this return, and we can call this OK function here. Inside that, we can pass this result variable. Since we are calling async method here, we can add the await keyword here. Now let's look how this web API method works. For that, we have to run this web API method. I will go to this debug option here, then click on this start without debugging option. In order to test the working of this application, I'm going to use this application here, Postman. So by default, you can see the default URI here, API/values. So it consumes this web API method from this default controller values here. Now let's make a post request into this new web API method here, post application user. For that, we can use this Postman software here. So we have to make a post request. Corresponding URI will be something like this: API/application user/register. Along with that, we have to use this local host with port number. Let me copy this, paste here. Now inside this body tab here, we are going to pass a JSON object. For now, I will paste a JSON object containing details of new user. If we make this post request with this JSON object, probably it won't work for the first time itself because of some default validations inside identity call. So that is what I want to show you first. So let's make this post request. So here we have the response. Inside that, you can see there are these much validation errors. Password must be at least 6 characters. Password must have at least one non-alphanumeric character, at least one lowercase, at least one uppercase. So there are some default validations that is specified inside this identity type which we have inherited here. So inside this identity user entity type, there are some default validations. So next we are going to discuss how we can customize these validations as per our requirement. For that, back to this startup class here, inside this configure services function, we can customize those validations here. So we can do this services.configure function can be called. It is of the type identity options. For that, we have to use this namespace. Inside this function, I will pass a lambda expression with options. Along with these validations for password, there is one more validation which is requirement of digits inside the password. So we can do this options.password.require digit, and I will set it as false. After that, we have the validation for requirement of non-alphanumeric characters. So I will set that false here. Options.password.require non-alphanumeric, and I will set it as false. After that, we have lowercase validation. So we can reset this property require lowercase as false. After that, we have uppercase validation, require uppercase, and I want to reduce this min length from 6 to 4. So we just need to do this required length, and I will set it as 4 here. So there should be at least 4 characters inside the password. Now let's make this post request again with a valid user object. So password should have at least 4 characters. Now let's make the request. We have to build this project. So go to build and build solution. After successful build, we can post this request again. So here we have another validation error. Username or Angelica Ramos is invalid, can only contain letters or digits. So we just need to remove this space from here. Now let's make the request again. Boom. Since this property succeeded is set as true, this user should be inserted successfully. Now let's check that inside the management studio. Now let's execute the select star statement from this users table here. So here we have the new record for Angelica Ramos. For now, I will stop the development of this web API. Now let's design front-end UI for this user registration in Angular 7. So here we have already created the .NET Core Web API project. Now let's create an Angular 7. For that, we have to execute few commands from Angular CLI. So we have to open command prompt from this folder directory. For that, you can use this shortcut, hold shift, then right click on your mouse, then select this option, open command window here. So here we have open command prompt from this folder directory. Now in order to create the Angular project, we just need to execute these commands: ng new, then application name. I will name it as Angular 7. Hit enter. Would you like to add Angular routing? Type Y for yes. Then which style sheet format would you like to use? I will stick with CSS. So this will create an Angular project inside this folder directory. As part of that, here we have already created this Angular 7 folder. Currently it is installing some default packages from npm, so it will take some time to complete this process. So I will post this recording after finishing this installation or creation of the project. I will start. Finally, we have created this project successfully. Let me close this command prompt here. So here we have the new project Angular 7. For this Angular development, I will be using the IDE Visual Studio Code Editor. You can use the Visual Studio itself. I would like to use VS Code Editor. So in order to open this project in VS Code Editor, right click here, then open with code. So here we have opened the particular folder inside the IDE. First of all, let me run this project. For that, open new terminal here. Then we have to execute these Angular CLI commands: ng serve, then --open, or in short you can use O, so that it will compile and open this project in your default web browser. Hit enter. So this is how the default Angular 7 application looks like. Now for this Angular application development, I will be using Bootstrap. So go to this website getbootstrap.com and click on this get started button here. We have to reference these style sheet and JavaScript inside the Angular project. First of all, let me copy this CSS reference, then back to the Angular project here, then open index.html, and I will paste the link just above this head end tag here. After that, we have these JavaScript files. Let me copy all of them, and I will paste that just above this body end tag here. Before continuing with this app development, I want to show you the structure of the application that we want to build. For that, I'm going to create a new text file here. I will name the file as appstructure.txt, and I will paste the structure of the application here. So first of all, here we have the parent component user. Inside that, we have this registration component, and here we have the shared folder. Inside that, we have this user service class. So this is what we need for this user registration application. In the next video, we have to implement login and logout feature, and we can add further components into this application later. So in order to create these components and service classes, let me open one more terminal here. Let me hide this Explorer here. You can use the shortcut Control B. In order to create a component, you can use this command ng g for generate, c for component, and we have to create the user component. So when we execute this command, it will create a component like this. Here you can see the default component. For single component, we have these much files: one style sheet, one HTML, one file with extension spec.ts, which is for test purpose, and here we have the original TypeScript file for the component. File with extension spec.ts and this style sheet is not required for the components inside this application. So in order to skip the creation of these two files, we can do this. First of all, in order to skip the file with extension spec.ts, we can do this: flag spec as false. And in order to skip the creation of component specific style sheet, we just need to use this flag here: inline dash style. In short, you can use --yes. Hit enter. So here you can see the newly created component user. Inside that, we have two files, one file for HTML and one for TypeScript. Inside this TypeScript file, we have this array styles. If you have any component specific CSS, you can add that here. After that, we have to create this child component registration. So let me close this Explorer. In order to create that, we can use the previous ng command with few modifications. So we have to create that registration component inside this user folder. So we just need to do this user / registration. Hit enter. So here we have created the component. Let's see that inside the Explorer. So here it is. Now we have to create the service class here, user service. We just need to do this ng g for generate, s for service. We need to create an user service class. So just type user here. For this service creation command also, there will be a file with extension spec.ts for test purpose. In order to skip the creation of the file, we just need to reset the flag spec as false. We have to create this inside the shared folder. So we have to mention the folder name here before this user. So shared / user. Hit enter. It should be created inside the shared folder here. So here is the service class user service. So here we have done with creation of components and service class. Now let's define the routing for this application. While creating this application, we have already mentioned the routing configuration of the application. So as a result of that, here we have the separate module app route module. Inside this routes array here, we just need to specify the route for the application. For that, we just need to add an object like this path. First of all, I will set this as user, and I will set the component as user component. So into this route, I want to add a child route. So you can add this children array here. It will be an array. Inside that, we can have as much as children routes. So first of all, we'll have a children route. Path will be registration, and corresponding component will be registration component. So in order to access this route here, registration, we have to make a request like this /user /register. Okay, that's it. So here we have defined one route inside this application, which is /user /registration. So both of these components will be displayed inside the page that we can see in a bit. Before that, I want to set the default route here. For that, I will add another object inside the array, and path will be an empty string. And we want to set this like this, redirect to /user /registration. So if there is no route specified in the URL, this default component will be, or this default route will be shown. Finally, for this default route, we have to set this path match as full. Currently, this default appearance of this application is responsible for the default component here, app component HTML. These HTML codes are displayed inside this index.html as a result of corresponding component tag here. So this tag will be replaced by the HTML from the app component HTML. Okay, so instead of this default HTML here, we will show the HTML based on the route we have. Okay, so current route will define the HTML which is to be loaded here. For example, if you try to access this route here /user /registration, inside this router outlet, it will be replaced by this user component. Okay, now inside that, we should have another router outlet. That means inside this user component HTML, we need another router outlet for this registration component. Okay, so open this user registration, and here we have the corresponding HTML. Instead of this default HTML here, I will add a div with class container, which is from Bootstrap. Inside that, we will use the grid system from Bootstrap. So we will have this class called MD8, so that it will take 8 columns from grid. Apart from that, we need another class offset md2. Inside this div, we will have another tag for router outlet. Let me save all of these modifications here. Back to the application. So by default, we are inside the route /user/registration. So as a result of default HTML inside this registration component, we have shown this text here, registration works. Inside this component HTML, we have to design the form for user registration. Now let's start designing the form for user registration. Before that, I want to show you how we can switch into Zen mode in VS Code editor. In Zen mode, only this file will be visible. Other Explorer, then terminal will be hidden. In order to switch into Zen mode, you can use the shortcut, hold Ctrl, then press K, release both of them, then press EZ. So here we are inside the Zen mode. So first of all, we are going to use the grid system from Bootstrap. So we need a div with class row, and we have to add small margin from top. So we can use this Bootstrap class, M for margin, T for top, and we will apply a margin of the range 4. Inside this row div, we need 2 columns. So we will have the div with class called md-6. Like this, we need one more div. Let me copy this and pasting below that. Before designing the form, let me update the global style sheet. For that, you can drag this Explorer from the left side, and we have to open this file styles.css. Inside this file, I will paste some CSS rules which I have made for this project. Let me paste that here. Let me save this, then back to the component HTML, register component HTML. Inside this first column, I want to show the application name. So first of all, I will have this div with class row, and I will set the height for this div here. So we can add this style attribute here. I will set the height for 50 pixel. Inside this div, we need another div with class called md12, so that it will take the 100% width, and we want to apply margin along top and bottom will be set as auto, and I will have this custom class site hyphen header, which I have specified inside the global style sheet. And inside this div, I want to show an image, so I will have this img control here. Before that, I want to add the image into this project. So here we have the assets folder. Inside that, I will add another folder, img, and here is the image that I want to add into this project. Let me drag that and place inside this img folder here. Now we can specify the src attribute of the img, src/assets/img/adduser.png, which is the name of the image that we have just added. For this img control also, we have to add few classes. So class, we need these classes in order to center this image horizontally. So first of all, we have this bootstrap class mx-auto, so that this will apply margin from both ends left and right as auto, d-block, so that it will set the display as block. After this image control here, we have to have the h1 for displaying the application name. I will set it as user registration. Just below this h1 element, I will have a paragraph, and inside this paragraph, everything should be in italic. So I will enclose all of the text inside this em tag. Inside that, we have to show this. We will implement this user registration using ASP.NET Core Web API and Angular 7. I want to make this text ASP.NET Core Web API in bold. For that, we have to enclose this text with strong tag. In order to enclose HTML text, we have a shortcut in VS Code editor. Just select the text, then we have to open the command palette. For that you have this shortcut Ctrl+Shift+P. Then just write this text wrap with abbreviation, hit enter, and we have to enclose this text with strong tag. So you can type strong here, then don't forget to hit enter. Like this, we have to make this Angular 7 as bold. So select the text, then open command palette, wrap with abbreviation, then type strong, hit enter. So inside this first div here, we have shown the application or heading. And inside the second div here, we have to design the form. Now let me save all of these modifications. Then back to the application, let's look how it looks like. So here we have a problem with image. Yes, we don't need to mention this src here. By default, it will be inside the src folder. Let me remove that, save, then back to the application. That's it. So inside the first div, we have shown the application header or heading. Now inside the second div here, we have to design the user registration form. So let's look how we can do that. We will design the form using reactive forms approach. So we have to add corresponding module inside app_module.ts file here. So I will add the import statement here, and we have to import from Angular forms. We'll import reactive forms module. Now we have to add the same class inside this imports array here. Now we have to define the form group with required form controls that I will define inside this service class here. I will create the form group inside this service class here, and then I will inject that inside this app_module.ts file here. So same injected service instance can be accessed across all of the components inside the application. So I will define the form group property inside the service class here. First of all, I will inject form builder inside this service class here. So private FB, it's of the type form builder. Click on this so that it will add the corresponding import statement at the top. Now let's define the form controls. So I will define a new property here, form model, which is equal to this dot fb dot group function can be called. Inside this function call, we can pass an object which contains all the form controls for the form. First of all, we have username, and which is equal to an array. Inside this array, first of all, we can pass the default value of the control. Like this, we have to create few more controls. So let me copy this and pasting below that. This is for full name. Then we have email, password, then confirm password. This is for email. Then after that, we have full name. Then we have password. Then we have confirm password. So here we have 5 form controls: username, email, full name, password, and confirm password. Now I want to move these controls related to password into another form group. So we can do this. I will name the group as passwords is equal to this dot fb dot group function can be called. Inside that, we need another object, and it contains these 2 form controls. Let me cut this and paste here. So here we have defined the form builder property form model in order to design the form. Now we have to design the form inside this component register component HTML. We can't access this service property inside this component. We have to inject that inside this app_module.ts file. So we just need to do this. User service is to be added inside this providers array. Now inside this component TypeScript file, we just need to do this public service. It is of the type user service. Now we can access the user service instance using this property service. So back to the component HTML here. Now I will define a new element form here. We don't need this action attribute. I will use the form group directive here, form group, and which is equal to service dot form model. Inside that we have defined form controls for this form that you can see here, form model. For each of these form controls we have to have form elements inside this form here. So first of all, I want to set this autocomplete as off so that we can prevent autocomplete or prediction from previous posted form data inside the form controls. So first of all, we need a div with class form dash group. First of all, we will have the form controls for username. We have label. We don't need this for attribute here, username. After this label, we need an input control with class form dash control. So we don't need this text attribute here. By default it will be of the type text, so I will remove this. Now this input control should reflect this form control here, username. So in order to do that, for that we just need to add this attribute form control name, and we have to set the exact name, username. Let me copy this and pasting here. Like this, we have to create 4 more controls: email, full name, password, and confirm password. For that, I will just replicate this div here. For that, you can use the shortcut Alt Shift then downward arrow. So here we have email, then full name, then password, after that confirm password. So this is for email. Corresponding form control will be email, then we have full name, now we have 2 form controls left, which are password and confirm password from this form group passwords. So first of all, we have to enclose these 2 divs inside another div. So select these 2 divs. First of all, we have to open command palette. So use the shortcut Control Shift P, then just search for wrap with abbreviation. We have to wrap these 2 divs with another div. So just type div here, hit enter, and we have to set the attribute form group name as passwords. Now inside this form group passwords, we have password and confirm password. So we can do this. Form control name will be password, corresponding label will be password, then we have confirm password, after all of these form controls, we want to have a submit button. So for that, I will add another div with class form hyphen row. Inside that, we need another div with class form group, and we want to display the submit button using 8 columns from Bootstrap Grid system. So we need this class call -md -8, and we need an offset of 2 columns. So offset md 2. Inside this div, we will have the submit button. So button, which is of the type submit, it has few classes, btn, then btn -lg, then we have btn -block, and I will set this button text as sign up. Now let me save all of these modifications here, then back to the application. Boom! So here we have the user registration form. All of the form styles are defined inside the global style sheet. Now let's implement form validation. For this form, I want to make these form controls username, password, and confirm password as mandatory. So generally, form controls with mandatory validation, we will have an asterisk marks along the corresponding label. So we have to have an asterisk mark along with this username, password and confirm password. For that, we just need to add the required class along with this form group div here. So required, now we have to add the same for remaining form controls. Password is required, so I will add the class here, confirm password, save, then back to the application. So here you can see the asterisk mark, red asterisk mark along with the required mandatory fields. We have shown these asterisk marks using the CSS rules inside the style sheet here. Okay, now we have to define the validations inside the form builder variable here. In order to set the required validation for this control, we just need to do this validators dot required. We need to add the same validation for these two form controls here, password and confirm password. Now for this email control, we don't have a mandatory validation or required validation for this control, but if there is something inside this text box, it should be a valid email address. So we have to add the corresponding email validation here. So validators dot email. Inside the .NET Core Web API, we have customized identity core for password min length as 4. So we have to apply the same validation here. Validators dot min length function can be called here. Inside this function, we have to pass 4. If there is a control with more than one validation, we can pass validations in another. So here we have passed these two validation inside another array. Now we have defined the validation for these form controls. Now we have to show validation error indications inside the HTML here. Whenever there is an error inside this user control because of required validator, we have to show this label with class text hyphen danger. We don't need this for attribute here. We only need to show this label when there is a validation error because of this form control username. So in order to hide and show this validation error indication, we have to use this ngIf directive here, ngIf, which is equal to service dot form model dot get function can be called. Inside this function, we can pass the corresponding control name, so which is here username. So by calling this get function from this form builder variable form model, we can access this form control here username. Then we can do this. We will check this property text. This form control is text and this control has a validation error because of required validator. So we can check that with this errors object. If there is an errors object and it contains this validation error required, so in that case we will show this label. Inside this label, we need to show this text. This field is mandatory. Like this, we have to show validation error indication for this email. For email, we have a validation because of email format. So instead of this required, we have to use email error type. If there is any error because of invalid email address, we have to show this message invalid email address. Instead of this control username, we have email. Let me change that here also. We will show these validation error indications when the control has some validation error even after user visited the control. Okay. After this email, we have password. So let me copy this. For full name we don't have any validation. Let me copy this validation error indication label and pasting here for password. For password we have two types of validation. First of all we have required. So control name will be password. This control is test and it has a validation of the type required. And in that case we have to show this error indication that is similar to here. This field is mandatory. Let me copy this and pasting here. After that we have min length validation. In order to check for the min length validation, we have to check this property min length. And corresponding text will be minimum 4 characters required. Since this password and confirm password is inside another form group here, which is passwords, so we have to mention that inside this get function here, passwords dot password should be passed inside this get function. Let me copy this and pasting here. Now we have this same required validation for confirm password control also. So I will copy this label from here and pasting here for confirm password. Instead of password we have confirm password, passwords dot confirm password. Now let me save all of these modifications here. Then back to the application. For this username we have required validation. So if I visit this control and focus out from the control, you can see the validation error. This field is mandatory. Email control is not mandatory. If I enter something inside that, it should be a valid email address. Then for password it is required, and for this confirm password also we have the required validation. For this password we have min length set as 4 characters. So all of the validations are working here. Now we have to implement one more validation for these two controls, password and confirm password. Text entered into this password control must match text entered inside this confirm password. So let's look how we can check that. So back to the form builder variable here, form model. Inside that we have this inner form group passwords, and we have to compare the values of its controls password and confirm password. Actually there is no default validator to compare these form controls values, so we have to define a custom validator. For that, along with this form controls object, we can define another object, and we can do this validator is equal to this dot compare passwords. So this is a function which is to be defined. Inside that we have to compare these form controls values. So here we have the function compare passwords. For this function we have a single parameter which is of the type form group. So inside this FP parameter we will have a form group object which is similar to this one here. It contains two controls, password and confirm password. Now whenever we have a mismatch of passwords inside these two form controls here, we will set a validation error for this confirm password control here. So first of all, I'm going to define a property let, and property name will be confirm password control. So inside this property I will save this control here. So we can do this fb dot get function can be called. Inside that we have to pass this control name confirm password. Now one more thing, for this password control we have multiple validators here. One is required and one is min length. Even though at a given time only one validation error is raised, inside this form control has two validation error because of required validation and mil length. Initially it shows this required validation error. Then if I start typing inside the control, then only it will raise the mil length validation error. In same way, for this confirm password control, we already have this required validation. Now inside this custom validation here, we have to set one more validation error. That means if the passwords inside these form controls does not match each other, we will raise a new error, password mismatch. Okay, if there is no error because of this required validation, then only we will check for this validation, password mismatch. Now if there is any validation error inside this control, it will be managed inside this object errors. Now if there is no validation error inside this control, this property will be null. If there is a validation error because of required validation, then this property required will be set as true. In the same way, if we have a error because of password mismatch, we will set this property password mismatch as true. So first of all, I will add this if clause here. If this control, confirm password control, does not have any errors, so we can check this null property here, or it has an error because of this password mismatch, so we can do this. There is a property password mismatch in this errors object. So we will check for password mismatch if any of these two conditions is true, whether this control has no error or there is an error because of password mismatch. So if there is a required validation error, we won't check for password mismatch. So first of all, we will compare the values from these two controls, password and confirm password. So we can do this if first of all we have to get this control. For that we can call this similar get function here. Inside that, instead of confirm password, we have password dot value will retrieve the value from this password control here, dot value, and if the value inside this control is not equal to value inside this confirm password control, there is a mismatch. Okay, so we will compare the values from the two password controls. If they does not match each other, we have to set this error password mismatch. For that we can do this confirm password control dot set errors function can be called. Inside that we just need to pass an object to set this property password mismatch. So password mismatch, I will set it as true here. If they match each other, we have to set errors object as null. For that we can call the same function set errors. Inside the function I will pass null here. So this is all we need to do to compare those two passwords. Now we have to show validation error indication if there is any error, validation error because of password mismatch. So we will show the indication just below this confirm password text box here. Okay, so let me copy this and pasting below that. So we have to check for password mismatch error here, password mismatch. Inside the label I will show this text confirm password does not match. Let me save all of these modifications, then back to the application. If I enter 1 2 3 4 here, we should enter 1 2 3 4 here also. If there is a mismatch, we will have this validation error confirm password does not match. Finally, we have completed with validations inside the form. Now I want to set the type of these input controls here as password, so that the characters inside these controls will be shown as a sequence of dots or asterisk marks based on the browser you are using. So back to the component HTML here, I will set the type here, type is equal to password. We have to do the same for confirm password control also. Save. Now let's look how we can submit this form so that we can insert a new user into user DB. Before that, I want to disable this button if this form as a whole is not valid. So back to the component HTML here, I will add the disabled attribute here, disabled. We will apply this attribute only when this form is not valid. For that, we can check this service dot form model dot valid. We have to disable this button when this form is not valid, so we have to use the negation here. Save. Then back to the application. Initially you can see the blurred submit button because this form as a whole is not valid. If you populate these form controls properly, this submit button will be enabled. Now let's look how we can submit the form. For that, I'm going to define a new function inside the service class here, which will make the HTTP post request into the web API project. So I will name the function as register. In order to make the HTTP post request, we have to use HTTP client class. So I will add the corresponding import statement here, import statement, and we have to import the class from Angular common HTTP, and we have to import this class HTTP client. Now let's inject this class inside this constructor, private HTTP, which is of the type HTTP client. In order to use this class, we have to add the corresponding module inside app-module.ts file. So first of all, let me copy this import statement so that we can use that inside this module file here. Let me paste that here. We have to import HTTP client module class. Let me copy this, and we have to add inside this imports array here. Now back to the service class function here, register. First of all, I will define a variable body. Inside that, I will populate the data which is to be sent into web API project. So first of all, we have username, which is equal to, we have to set the value here, this dot form model dot value dot username. So this property will have the value from this control username text box here. Okay, now after that we have few more properties. Let me copy this and pasting below that. We have email. You don't have to do this separately. You can use the shortcut Control D. So if I place the cursor over this username here, if I use the shortcut Control D, it will select the corresponding word username, next word username here. So both of these username are selected. So next we need full name. So we just need to type that here. Both of these words will be updated. Full name. Like this, we have password. Now in order to make the post request, we just need to do this dot http dot post function can be called. Now inside the function first parameter, we have to pass the corresponding method URI that you can see inside this Postman here. First of all, let me copy this base URI from here. Then I will store that inside a read-only variable here. Let me define a read-only variable, read-only base URI, and I will initialize the property here. Now back to the function call, this dot base URI. Into that we have to concat this / application user / register. Let me copy this and pasting here. As a second parameter, we have to pass this body variable. Let me copy this and pasting here. As a result of this post function call, it will return an observable. So we have to return this observable from this function. Return. Now we can call this register function inside this form submit event. Now let's wire up a form submit event. For that, back to the form here. Then I will add a submit event, submit, and we will call the function on submit. Now let's define the function inside the TypeScript file here. On submit, inside the function, we have to call the service function. So this service.register function can be called here. As a result of this register function execution, it will return an observable. So it will return an observable. So we can subscribe to that observable here. Subscribe. Inside that, we can define the callback function. First of all, we have the success function. After that, we have the error function. Inside this error function, we will print the error object into the console. So console.log. Inside that, we can pass this error object. If the operation is successful, it will return an object like this. It will have the succeeded property set as true if the operation is successful. If there is any error because of validation, that will be shown inside this errors object here. Since we have checked validations like required validation, min length validation, email format validation, there won't be such validations inside this errors object. Instead of that, we can have duplicate username validation error. Let's make this post request again with same username. So here we have the response, succeeded is reset as false, and here we have the error, duplicate username Angelica Ramos is already taken. So we have to deal these situations inside the success function here. So first of all, I will set this parameter type as any. Okay. Then inside the function, first of all, I will check for the succeeded property. If response dot succeeded, if this property is true, then the operation is successful. So inside this if clause here, I want to reset these form controls here. For that, we just need to do this dot service dot form model, which is the form builder variable dot reset function can be called. I want to reset the form during the ng on a lifecycle hook also, so I will copy paste that here. Now, in order to deal with this errors array here, we have to add an else block here. Else, inside this else block, I'm going to iterate through this array errors. So we can do this. I will use this snippet for each, and here we have to pass the corresponding array. So response dot errors. Inside this iteration, I will add a switch block. Inside this switch case, I want to check for this property code element dot code. If the code is equal to duplicate username, we have to show this error username is already taken. If the error code is something else, we want to show this message registration is failed. We can show these error messages in a bit. Let me save all of these modifications. Then back to the application here. Now before making the post request inside the form submit event, we have to do one more thing inside the web API project here. This web API project will block requests from another application which is hosted in a different domain or different port number. This feature is called cross-origin resource sharing, in short CORS, C-O-R-S. So we have to enable CORS inside this .NET Core Web API project for this Angular project port number 4200. First of all, we have to install the NuGet CORS package. So right click on this Web API project here, then manage NuGet packages. Then inside this browse tab, search for Microsoft ASP.NET Core CORS package, and we have to install this package. Click on install. After successful installation of the package, back to this startup class here. Inside this configure services function, we just need to do this services dot add course function can be called here, and inside this configure function we have to do this app use course function can be called. Inside the function call we will have a lambda expression with this parameter builder. So we can do this builder dot with origins function can be called. Inside this function we have to pass the corresponding Angular URL. So I will copy that from here. Let me copy this and pasting here. Make sure to remove the / at the end of this URL here. After this function call, we have to allow all headers and methods for the web API methods. So we can do this allow any header. After that, allow any method. After successful build, back to this Angular project here. Now let's try to insert a new user. Username will be Fiona123. Then email will be fiona@gmail.com. Full name will be Fiona Green. Password will be 1234. 1234. Submit this form. Error 500 internal server error means something went wrong inside the web API method. Now let's look what we have sent from the post request. That you can see inside the network tab here, and click on this last register. So here we have the last post request. Inside this payload, request payload, you can see the object that we have sent through the post request. So inside this we have email, full name, username, but password is not there. So that is the reason for this error. So let's check that inside this service function here. Body variable contains the values from the form. Yes, in order to receive the value from password text box, we have to do some additional work. Since it contains inside this form group passwords, we can do this value.passwords.password attribute should be passed. Let me save this. Back to the application. Let me populate this form again. Now let's submit the form. If the operation is successful, this form should be reset to its initial state. So far nothing happens. Let's execute the select star statement from the DB again. So here we have inserted the new record Fiona Green, but we have not reset the form here. So it should be because of this property here. We have a typo for this succeeded. Let me copy this and pasting here. Okay, so if the operation is successful, this form should be reset to its initial state. Let's check that with another user, Alex123. I will just fill the required fields only. 1234, 1234. Submit the form. That's it. We have reset the form controls. Now let's execute the select star statement again. So here we have the new user Alex. Now after the successful registration, I want to show a notification saying registration successful. For that, I'm going to use the npm package ngx toaster, which we have used in previous projects also. So I will search for ngx-toaster. In order to install this package, we have to use this command here. Let me copy this. Let me open one more tab here. I will paste the npm command here. Hit enter. Installation of the package is successful. Now back to the package documentation here. In order to use this package, we have to add these two classes into the app module.ts file. Browser animations module and toaster module. Let me copy this. Back to the project, open app module.ts file. I will add the import statement here. We have to add this browser animations module inside this imports array here. After that, we have toaster module. Toaster module. From this class, we have to call this for root function. For this package, we have a style sheet toaster.css. So we have to add the reference inside the angular.json file. Let me copy this reference and back to the project, open angular.json file. Then let's search for styles array. So inside this styles array, I'm going to add this CSS reference also. Now let's look how we can show a notification using toaster module. So back to the component, registration component here. First of all, we have to import the toaster service here. So private toaster, which is of the type toaster service class. Now inside this success function here, we can do this dot toaster dot success function can be called. As a first parameter, we have to pass the toaster message. So it will be something like this: new user created. As a second parameter, we can pass the notification title. So it will be something like this: registration successful. Now we have to show this error message when registration fails. Now for this duplicate username error, I want to show the error inside the toaster notification. So we can do this dot toaster dot error function can be called. As a first parameter, I will pass this username is already taken. As a second parameter, I will set the notification title registration failed. In the default case here, I want to show this same error notification. Instead of this custom error message, I will show this description property. So we can do this element dot description. Let me save all of these modifications here. Since we have made changes outside this src folder, which is inside this angular.json file, we have to restart this server. So first of all, we have to stop this server. For that, you can use the shortcut Ctrl+C, then type y for yes, then execute the same command ng serve --o. Now let's try to insert a new user, John 123, then password will be 1234 1234. Submit the form. Boom. So here we have successfully inserted the record, and here we have the toaster notification. In order to see this toaster notification with latest version of Bootstrap, we have to set the opacity of the div to 1. Okay. Now inside the toaster notification, I want to show a progress bar. For that, we can do this back inside the app module.ts file. Inside this for root function here, we can pass an object, and inside that we will have this property progress bar, and it is set as true. If you want to customize this notification further, you have the package documentation here. Let me save this modification back to this project. Let me insert new user Emma 123. Password will be 1234 1234. Submit the form. So here we have the progress bar, and we have inserted the corresponding user into the DB here, Emma 123. Let me try to insert the same user here, Emma 123 1234 1234. Submit the form. So here we have the error message, username is already taken. Now let's change this username, submit the form. So here we have inserted the user. Now finally, I want to show one more thing. While working with .NET Core Web API project, I have seen these types of errors. Net error invalid HTTP response. This is not something because of mistakes in our code. This is something to be fixed inside .NET Core Web API. You can see the workaround in GitHub here. You just need to copy this, then back to the Web API project, open startup, then paste that inside this configure function here. So that's it guys. In this video we have discussed how to insert a new user into .NET Core Web API project using Identity Core and Angular 7. In the next video we will update these projects for JWT user authentication, login and logout with .NET Core Web API and Angular 7. If you found this video helpful, please thumbs up this video, and for more awesome videos like this, please be subscribed to this channel CodAffection. In order to make more helpful and quality tutorials like this, you can support this channel through PayPal donations. I have given the link in first comment and video description. Please like and share this video with your friends and colleagues so that they can benefit from this. Have a nice day.